Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. For those of you who don't know, this is our new series of midweek shorts. I'm hoping to do these videos under 10 minutes, so between 5 and 10 minutes. And the idea is that they're for things that aren't really worth a full video, or maybe they're not 100% relevant to the topics that we're doing, but it's something I've come across that's quite cool, or it's a conversion idea, something like that. And for this one, I've been, as some of you may know, this year I want to look a bit at the War of 1812 and the naval. I want to do a bit more naval stuff as well. I rigged my first ever ships last week, so I've got a bit of a thirst for it. So I've been looking at some American and British naval stuff, and I came across this account of one of the first major successes of the US Navy. It's not in our time period. It actually occurred in 1779. So I don't think it's worth putting into a Napoleonic video because it's not necessarily that relevant. But I've got a really cool eyewitness account of this engagement, and I think, you know, a ship boarding action in the Napoleonic Wars, you know, the Battle of the Nile or the Battle of Trafalgar, something like that, wouldn't have been it would have been fairly similar to how this one went. So I'm going to talk about two main ships and one main guy. The main guy is Captain John Paul Jones. He's something of a hero in American military circles. And the two ships are the 44-gun HMS Serapis from the British side, and the much smaller converted merchantman, the USS Bonhomme Richard. Now, this account takes place off Flamborough Head, which is actually not too far from where I live in Yorkshire, and it took place on, well, as we'll see, it took place in autumn 1779. This account is given in Louis L. Snyder and Richard M. Morris's book, They Saw It Happen, and it's just, I just wanted to go for the full account as is. I won't be interrupting it with my usual editorializing. Just to let you know that there'll be a couple of phrases that I use here. I'm going to try and find a picture to put it up on the screen of various nautical terms. I talk about things like the mizzen mast and things like that, just because I'm reading direct quotes. So if you're not 100% sure, check out the screen. There'll be a label diagram on there. But to be honest, it doesn't hugely matter if you understand 100% what all the terms mean. So, without further ado, I buried the lead long enough. Here we go. An observer aboard Captain John Paul Jones's ship, the USS Bonhomme Richard, describes the most famous battle. Quote, "On the 23rd of September 1779, being below, I was roused by an unusual noise upon deck. This induced me to go upon deck, where I found the men were swaying up the royal yards, preparatory to making sail for a large fleet under our lee. I asked the coasting pilot what fleet it was, and he answered," now quoting the coasting pilot, "the Baltic fleet, under convoy of the Serapis of 44 guns, and the Countess of Scarborough of 20 guns. He continues, "A general chase then commenced of the Bonhomme Richard, the Vengeance, the Pallas, and the Alliance." And sorry, I know I said I wouldn't editorialise, but these were American ships that were alongside the Bonhomme Richard. At this time, our fleet headed to the northward with a light breeze, Flamborough Head being about 2 leagues distant. At 7 p.m, it was evident that the Baltic fleet perceived we were in chase, from the signal of the Serapis to the merchantman to stand inshore. At the same time, the Serapis and the Countess of Scarborough tacked ship and stood offshore, with the intention of drawing off our attention from the convoy. When these ships had separated from the convoy, about 2 miles, they again tacked and stood inshore after the merchantman. At about 8, being within hail, the Serapis demanded, 'What ship is that?' He was answered, 'I can't hear what you say.' Immediately after, the Serapis hailed again. At this moment, I received orders from Commodore Jones to commence the action with a broadside, which indeed appeared to be simultaneous on board both ships. Our position being to windward of the Serapis, we passed ahead of her, and the Serapis coming up from the larboard quarter, the action commenced abreast of each other. The Serapis soon passed ahead of the Bonhomme Richard, and when she thought she had gained a distance sufficient to go down athwart the forefoot to rake us, found she had not enough distance, and the Bonhomme Richard, having headway, ran her bows into the stern of the Serapis. We had remained in this situation but a few minutes when we were again hailed by the Serapis. 'Has your ship struck?' to which Captain Jones answered, "I have not yet begun to fight." As we were unable to bring a single gun to bear upon the Serapis, our topsails were backed. While those of the Serapis being filled, the ships separated. The Serapis bore short round upon her heel, and her jib boom ran into the mizzen rigging of the Bonhomme Richard. In this situation, the ships were made fast together with a hawser, the bowsprit of the Serapis to the mizzen mast of the Bonhomme Richard, and the action recommenced from the starboard sides of the two ships. A novelty in naval combat was now presented to many witnesses, but to few admirers. From the commencement of the termination of the action, there was not a man on board the Bonhomme Richard ignorant of the superiority of the Serapis, both in weight of metal and the quality of the crews. The crew of that ship were picked seamen, and the ship herself had only been a few months off the stocks, whereas the crew of the Bonhomme Richard consisted of part American, English and French, and part of Maltese, Portuguese and Malays. These latter contributing, by their want of naval skill and knowledge of the English language, to depress rather than elevate the first hope of success in a combat under such circumstances. Neither the consideration for the relative force of our ships, the fact of the blowing up of gun decks above them by the bursting of two 18-pounders, nor the alarm that the ship was sinking, could depress the ardour or change the determination of the brave Captain Jones, his officers and men. Neither the repeated broadsides of the Alliance, given with a view of sinking or disabling the Bonhomme Richard, the frequent necessity of suspending the combat to extinguish the flames, which several times were within a few inches of the magazine, nor the liberation by the master-at-arms of nearly 500 prisoners, could change or weaken the purpose of the American commander. At the moment of liberation of the prisoners, one of them, a commander of a 20-gun ship taken a few days before, passed through the ports on board the Serapis and informed Captain Pearson that if he would only hold out a little while longer, the ship alongside would either strike or sink, and that all the prisoners had been released to save their lives. The combat was accordingly continued with renewed ardour by the Serapis. The fire from the tops of the Bonhomme Richard was conducted with so much skill and effect as to destroy ultimately every man who appeared upon the quarterdeck of the Serapis, and induced her commander to order the survivors to go below. Nor even under shelter of the decks were they more secure. The powder monkeys of the Serapis, finding no officer to receive the 18-pound cartridges brought from the magazines, threw them on the main deck and went for more. These cartridges being scattered along the deck, and numbers of them broken, it so happened that some of the hand grenades thrown from the main yard of the Bonhomme Richard, which was directly over the main hatch of the Serapis, fell upon this powder, and produced a most awful explosion. The effect was tremendous. More than 20 of the enemy were blown to pieces, and many stood with only the collars of their shirts upon their bodies. In less than an hour afterward, the flag of England, which had been nailed to the mast of the Serapis, was struck by Captain Pearson's own hand, as none of his people would venture aloft on this duty, and this too when more than 1,500 persons were witnessing the conflict and the humiliating termination of it from Scarborough and Flamborough Head. End quote. So there you go, that's just a quick long quote that I found I thought was really cool. As I say, it's got a bit of a local connection to me. Scarborough's not too far from where I live. So, there you go. It was just a very short episode, a good indication of the ferocity of boarding actions and naval combat there. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time.